Your grocery cart is pretty much a financial paper shredder on wheels. About 90% of what's landing in it right now isn't something you actually need to survive or eat well. In reality, there are roughly 20 items that truly pull their weight, while everything else is just extra margin for the supermarket, cleverly packaged and labeled as must-haves. What I'm about to show you is going to completely change how your next receipt looks when it prints out. So let's kick things off with the single most flexible, do-everything food sitting in your kitchen right now: eggs. Just one large egg delivers about 6 grams of complete protein, meaning it contains all 9 essential amino acids your body can't make on its own. Honestly, you'd probably rack up a bigger bill at a parking meter just standing there long enough to read that fact. But here's the part hardly anyone mentions. Nearly 90% of Americans aren't getting enough choline, a nutrient that plays a major role in memory and overall brain health. And guess where choline shows up in force? That plain, unassuming egg already sitting in your fridge. Unlike that bag of salad you bought last week with the best intentions, yeah, the one now dissolving into green sludge in the crisper drawer, eggs actually stick around. Kept refrigerated, they last 3 to 5 weeks. No pressure to rush, no food guilt, no tossing money in the trash. Every Sunday, I hard-boil a dozen and call it done. That's grab-and-go protein all week long without turning on a stove or washing a single pan. Eggs work for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and baking. Go ahead, try to name one other ingredient that pulls that off so effortlessly. I'll wait. The average household throws away about $1,500 worth of food every year, and eggs almost never end up in that waste pile. But protein is only half the story. To really make your meals go further, you need something else. And what I'm about to show you costs roughly 5 cents per serving. Rice. A 20-pound bag usually runs about 15 bucks. That sounds steep at first glance, but pause for a second and do the math. You're getting roughly 300 servings out of that one bag, which breaks down to about 5 cents per portion. 5 cents. You can't even make a phone call for that anymore, assuming you could somehow track down a working payphone in the first place. Here's where rice really starts to feel almost unfair. When white rice is stored the right way, in a cool and dry place, it can last up to 30 years. 3 full decades just sitting on a shelf, perfectly usable. That rice will probably outlast your car, your knees, and, let's be honest, maybe even your marriage. About half the planet relies on rice as a primary food source, and billions of people don't all make the same mistake. It also gets along with just about everything. Chicken, perfect match. Vegetables, no problem. Beans. Now you've got complete nutrition working together. Rice has a way of stretching pricier ingredients into real, filling meals. That $4 portion of stir-fry meat suddenly feeds the entire family once rice enters the picture. 1 cup of cooked rice delivers around 45 grams of carbohydrates, giving you steady, reliable energy without the sugar crash you get from that granola bar pretending to be a health food. Quick pro tip: cook your rice in chicken broth instead of water. It completely changes the flavor. You're welcome. And speaking of upgrades, the next item on this list pairs so perfectly with rice that together, they create something neither one can pull off on its own: dried beans. Here's a number that should honestly tick you off a little. Canned beans cost about 3 times as much as dried ones. You're not paying for anything special. You're paying extra for water and salt. A 1-pound bag of dried pinto beans usually costs around $2. That doesn't sound like much, but once cooked, that small bag turns into 6 or 7 full cups of food. That's meals for your family for days, and your heart benefits right along with you. You might as well mail it a thank you note. Research shows that people who eat beans 4 times a week have a 22% lower risk of heart disease. 22%. That's better than some prescription meds, and definitely cheaper than whatever your copay is these days. 1 cup of cooked black beans delivers about 15 grams of protein and 15 grams of fiber. Most Americans don't even hit 15 grams of fiber in an entire day, and here it is showing up in a single side dish. People love to get intimidated by the soaking part, but let's be real, it's not that deep. Toss the beans in water before bed, drain them in the morning, and you're done. Your grandma managed this just fine without YouTube, apps, or timers. You'll be okay. Now for the real magic. Remember that rice we talked about earlier? When you combine beans and rice, you get a complete protein. Every essential amino acid covered. No meat needed at all. Speaking of starting your day without meat, let's talk about oats. Your grandpa knew what he was doing. That plain, no-frills bowl of oatmeal he ate every single morning turns out to be heart medicine cleverly disguised as breakfast. Oats contain a special fiber called beta-glucan, and it does something impressive. It binds to cholesterol in your digestive system and helps usher it right out of your body. Studies show it can lower LDL cholesterol by 5 to 10% in just a few weeks. Those are numbers your doctor would absolutely applaud. Now let's look at the cost, because this is where oats embarrass most boxed cereals. A big canister usually runs about $4 and covers around 30 breakfasts. That's roughly 13 cents per morning. Meanwhile, those brightly colored sugar-drenched flakes cost $2 and somehow vanish by Wednesday. Energy matters too. Sugary cereals send your blood sugar soaring, then drop you flat by mid-morning. Oats, on the other hand, release energy slowly over 3 to 4 hours, keeping you steady and functional instead of hitting that 10 a.m. zombie phase. And oats aren't locked into breakfast duty. You can grind them into flour for pancakes or muffins, toss them into meatballs to hold everything together. My grandmother used that trick for decades before Pinterest ever existed. Plus, that same beta-glucan that helps your heart also keeps you feeling full longer, which makes afternoon snack attacks a whole lot easier to ignore. Speaking of vegetables you should actually be snacking on, quick detour. A few months ago, I didn't even know what a health ring was until my fiancé gave me one as a gift. And honestly, I'm still surprised more people aren't using these things. It tracks my stress levels in real time, and what caught me off guard was seeing how certain supplements made my stress score spike, while others clearly helped bring it down. I tweaked a few habits based on that data, and no exaggeration, I feel about 10 years younger. My wife mostly uses the ring to track her menstrual cycle, and she's borderline obsessed with checking her sleep quality score every morning. I also noticed they're running a limited 69% discount right now, though I have no idea how long that's going to stick around. At the moment, it's only $60, which makes it an absurd value when you compare it to other health rings selling for around $350 while offering fewer features. They're able to keep the price this low by cutting out middlemen like Amazon and Walmart, who normally jack up prices and take huge cuts, leaving customers paying 3 to 5 times more. If you're watching this on TV, you can check it out by pausing the video and scanning the QR code with your phone, or just click the first link in the video description. Now, back to food, specifically frozen vegetables. Here's a little truth bomb the produce aisle would rather keep quiet. That fresh broccoli sitting under the fancy misting system? It's likely been on a multi-day road trip spanning over 1,500 miles. Frozen broccoli, on the other hand, is usually flash frozen within hours of being harvested. So guess which one actually retains more nutrients? Studies comparing frozen spinach to fresh spinach that sat in a refrigerator for 5 days found that the frozen version had more vitamin C. Not the same amount, more. Turns out your grandmother was accidentally making genius nutrition choices every time she grabbed a bag from the freezer section. The price just seals the deal. A bag of frozen broccoli costs about $1.50 and can sit in your freezer indefinitely without going bad. No guilt. No sad, slimy vegetables lurking in the back of your crisper drawer like a produce horror movie. Prep time is basically 0 too. No washing, no chopping, no staring at brown spots wondering if they're dangerous or just rustic. You dump it in the pan and cook. On average, people throw away about 31% of the fresh vegetables they buy. With frozen vegetables, waste is almost non-existent. And now that we've covered that, let's move on to the cheapest fruit you can find in the entire store.
Bananas. Full stop. They're hands down the cheapest fresh fruit you'll find in any grocery store. And somehow they also manage to be one of the most nutrient-dense options in the entire produce aisle. A single medium banana delivers around 422 milligrams of potassium, which your heart relies on to keep a steady rhythm and your blood pressure depends on to stay in check. Most Americans fall short on potassium, yet the solution is sitting right there for about a quarter. Where bananas really get smart is in how they age. That speckled brown banana people usually toss in the trash? Don't. Freeze it and blend it into a smoothie later, or mash it straight into banana bread. Those dark spots mean the starches have converted into natural sugars, giving you more sweetness and letting you cut back on added sugar when you bake. Slightly green bananas pull a completely different move. They're rich in resistant starch, which feeds the good bacteria in your gut and supports digestion. Same fruit, different ripeness, totally different benefit. No plastic packaging required, no fridge space needed either. Nature basically gave it its own built-in wrapper. My grandfather used to joke that bananas were proof someone up there wanted us to have affordable snacks. He also swore by eating one before bed, saying the magnesium helped him sleep better. And honestly, he might have been onto something. Speaking of foods that come with their own built-in packaging, it's time to give tomatoes their moment, specifically canned tomatoes. Here's a fact that catches a lot of people off guard. The canned version is actually healthier than fresh. I know it sounds backwards, but the heat used during canning releases lycopene, a compound known for helping fight cancer. Fresh tomatoes contain some lycopene, sure, but canned tomatoes have 3 to 4 times more of it. Scientists figured this out years ago, yet people still feel a weird sense of guilt reaching for cans instead of hovering in the produce aisle. Meanwhile, a 28-ounce can costs less than $2 and turns into pasta sauce tonight, soup tomorrow, and chili the next day. One simple ingredient, endless uses. And let's be honest about fresh tomatoes for a second. They really only shine for a few months out of the year, roughly June through August. Outside of that window, they're usually pale, mealy, and deeply disappointing. Canned tomatoes, on the other hand, are harvested at peak ripeness and processed within hours, which means they taste like summer even in the middle of January. I once watched my neighbors drop $6 on imported Italian tomatoes. I used the California canned version for about $1.50, and not a single person at dinner noticed a difference. Not one. Plus, those cans sit quietly in your pantry for up to 2 years without demanding attention. No rushing, no spoilage, no throwing money away. Now, if we're talking about budget-friendly protein, chicken thighs deserve way more respect. Most people automatically grab chicken breast as if it's the only cut that exists, while the thighs sit there overlooked, quietly waiting for someone to give them a chance. Their only real offense? They're cheaper and actually taste good. Chicken breast usually runs $5 to $7 a pound, while thighs hover around $2 to $3. That's almost half the price for meat with real flavor. Here's the part no one seems to mention. Dark meat is incredibly forgiving. Overcook a chicken breast and you end up chewing on rubber. Overcook a thigh and it's still juicy and tender. That extra fat acts like a safety net for those moments when you get distracted by your phone while dinner's on the stove. And let's be honest, we've all done that. Those bones people usually toss in the trash? Save them. Toss them into a freezer bag, and before you know it, you've got the base for homemade stock that would cost $4 at the store. It's basically free value hiding in plain sight. Professional chefs have known this forever. Walk into any serious restaurant and look closely at what's actually being served. Thighs. They absorb marinades better, braise without falling apart, and stay moist even after hours in a slow cooker. One family pack can easily turn into 3 totally different meals. Grilled on Monday, stir-fried on Wednesday, and shredded into tacos by Friday. Speaking of jars that actually earn their spot in the kitchen, let's talk about peanut butter. There's a jar in almost every American pantry, yet most people write it off as food meant only for kids. Huge mistake. Just 2 tablespoons deliver about 8 grams of protein for roughly 15 cents. You can search the entire store and you won't find a better protein deal than that. Peanut butter is quietly impressive in other ways too. It doesn't even need refrigeration until you crack it open. Unopened, it can sit on a shelf for up to 9 months without a single complaint. No urgency, no pressure, and no guilt when it gets pushed to the back behind a couple of cereal boxes and forgotten for a while. Then there's the health side of things. Studies have linked regular peanut butter consumption to a 19% lower risk of heart disease in people over 50. Those fats aren't just calories. They're actually doing important work for your body. But versatility is where peanut butter really flexes. It works on breakfast toast, in lunch sandwiches, blended into smoothies, stirred into satay sauce for dinner, or eaten straight from the spoon during that 2 a.m. fridge light stare down. We've all been there. Mix a spoonful into your oatmeal and suddenly breakfast keeps you full until noon, cutting out those mid-morning vending machine runs. One jar can carry you through the entire day without breaking a sweat. Now let's give some overdue credit to a food that's been unfairly dragged for years: potatoes. Thanks to every low-carb diet trend out there, they've somehow been painted as a health villain, like eating one will instantly undo all your good choices. That's nonsense. Here's the part those gurus tend to skip over. One medium potato contains about 620 milligrams of potassium, significantly more than a banana. Your heart relies on that mineral to maintain a steady rhythm, and your blood pressure depends on it to stay in a healthy range. Potatoes also happen to be ridiculously affordable. They cost around 50 cents per pound and can sit quietly in a cool, dark corner of your kitchen for 2 to 3 months without going bad. Try getting that kind of shelf life out of your fancy salad greens. On top of that, potatoes are naturally fat-free and cholesterol-free, and they actually contain more vitamin C than tomatoes. Bet that fun fact didn't come up at your last dinner party. If you want a complete filling meal for less than $1, it's easy. Bake a potato, pile on some beans and frozen vegetables, and you're done. You've just made dinner for less than what a candy bar costs at a gas station. And here's the real mic drop moment. Scientists tested which foods keep people full the longest. Potatoes ranked number 1, above every other carbohydrate they studied. Cheap food is great, but let's be honest, cheap food without flavor is a punishment. That's where onions come in, and they might be the most overlooked ingredient in your entire kitchen. Think about it. They cost around 80 cents per pound, which is basically pocket change. Yet ask any professional chef what they can't cook without, and onions are always at the top of the list. Here's why. Onions are flavor amplifiers. They take plain chicken, simple rice, or basic beans and turn them into something you actually look forward to eating. It's not magic, it's chemistry. When you cook onions slowly over low heat, the sharp, eye-burning compounds break down and their natural sugars come forward. Suddenly, you've added sweetness and depth without sprinkling in a single grain of sugar. Their shelf life is almost unfair. Yellow onions can sit in a cool, dark corner of your kitchen for 2 to 3 months without any issues. Meanwhile, your fresh herbs gave up weeks ago, and that lettuce in the fridge has already turned into soup. The onions? Still solid. Still perfect. And here's a detail your doctor probably won't bring up. The sulfur compounds that make your eyes water are actually helping fight inflammation in your body. Those tears are just the cost of entry. Italian nonnas know this. Mexican abuelas know it. Chinese grandmothers know it too. Nearly every cuisine on the planet starts the same way, with onions sizzling in a pan. Speaking of essential aromatics that cost next to nothing, garlic deserves serious respect. It might be the only ingredient in your kitchen that also qualifies as actual medicine. Here's a fact your pharmacist probably won't volunteer. Fresh garlic contains allicin, a compound shown in studies to lower blood pressure about as effectively as some prescription drugs. And the price? 30 to 50 cents for an entire head. Meanwhile, your copay is likely $20 or more. That single head of garlic will sit perfectly fine on your counter for 3 to 6 months without any fuss. My grandmother kept hers in a little basket by the stove for decades, and she lived to 94. Coincidence? Maybe. But I'm not interested in testing my luck. There's a trick most people never hear about. If you want garlic's health benefits, you need to crush or chop it and then let it sit for about 10 minutes before cooking. That pause activates the compounds that do the heavy lifting. Add the garlic toward the end of cooking, and you'll preserve even more of those protective effects. Pre-minced garlic in a jar costs 5 times as much and tastes like pure disappointment. Fresh garlic takes about 10 seconds to crush. Your knuckles will survive. The cancer research is encouraging too. Large population studies show that people who regularly eat garlic have roughly a 30% lower risk of colorectal cancer. And if you've never roasted a whole head until it turns into soft, golden paste, you're missing out on one of life's simplest upgrades. Skip the butter for a second and let's talk about fats that are actually worth keeping around. Olive oil is the one bottle that truly deserves front row space in your kitchen. Most people get this completely backwards. They cook with cheap vegetable oil and save olive oil for salads only. That thinking needs to be flipped. Extra virgin olive oil contains oleocanthal, a compound that behaves in the body much like ibuprofen. You're not just adding flavor, you're seasoning your food with something that acts like natural medicine. People living in Mediterranean regions figured this out centuries ago. Populations that use olive oil generously have about 30% fewer heart attacks and strokes. Your cardiologist might charge you $200 to explain that, while Italian grandmothers have been living it for free the whole time. Now let's do the money math no one talks about. Buying one large bottle of quality olive oil and using it for everything often costs less than stocking separate bottles of vegetable oil, canola oil, and some overpriced finishing oil. One bottle handles every cooking job without issue. As for those bottles labeled light olive oil, that's pure marketing brilliance. Light refers to the flavor, not the calories. Same fat content, same calories, less taste. You're paying more to get less. Great deal for them. Terrible deal for you. Just store your olive oil away from heat and light. A dark cabinet does the job perfectly. Speaking of budget-friendly foods that come straight out of a can, tuna deserves a serious nod. A single can costs about $1.50 and delivers roughly 25 grams of protein. That's the same protein payoff you'd get from a $10 salmon fillet at the seafood counter. Not a bad trade. What most people don't realize is that canned tuna is often fresher than the fish sitting on ice at the store. Tuna is usually sealed in cans within hours of being caught, while that fresh fish may have spent days on a boat and even more time riding in a truck across the country. Mercury is always the concern people bring up, so let's clear that up. Light tuna contains much less mercury than albacore. Because of that, it's generally safe to eat light tuna 2 to 3 times a week without stress. My doctor told me this years ago, and I assumed there was a catch. Turns out, he was just handing out solid advice for free. Tuna also pulls its weight nutritionally. Those omega-3 fatty acids support brain health, help reduce inflammation, and may even lower the risk of cognitive decline as you get older. Think of it as long-term brain insurance packed into a metal can. As for water-packed versus oil-packed, here's the quick breakdown. Water-packed has about half the calories, while oil-packed versions tend to preserve more of the omega-3s. Either way, it's one of the best protein bargains in the store. Beta-carotene, the pigment that gives carrots their bright orange color, gets converted into vitamin A once it's inside your body. Your eyesight depends on it, and your immune system actively uses it to stay strong. And the best part? You're getting all of that for literal pocket change. Here's a trick I really wish someone had told me 20 years ago. When you cook carrots with a bit of fat, like butter or olive oil, your body absorbs up to 6 times more beta-carotene. 6 times. Raw carrot sticks are fine if you're snacking, but roasted carrots tossed in olive oil? That's basically medicine disguised as a side dish. And those cute little baby carrots in the fancy bags? They're not a special variety. They're just regular carrots that got trimmed down, polished, and spun around in a tumbler. You're paying triple the price for a cosmetic makeover. Speaking of things that aren't quite what they pretend to be, bread labels deserve a closer look. That wheat bread in your cart right now? Turn the bag over and check the ingredient list. If the first ingredient says wheat flour, without the word whole in front, you've basically bought white bread dressed up in brown clothing. It took me years to catch on to this little trick. The bread industry is very good at playing costume games. Real whole grain bread tells the truth right on the label. Whole wheat flour should be listed first. That's your signal that you're actually getting the good stuff. The fiber, the nutrients, and the parts of the grain your body is meant to use. And this isn't a minor detail. One slice of genuine whole grain bread delivers about 3 to 4 grams of fiber. Your digestion benefits, and your blood sugar stays steady instead of riding a roller coaster all morning. Research backs this up too. People who eat whole grains every day show about a 20% lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes. That's not an opinion. That's data. Bread does have one enemy though: mold. The fix is simple. Toss the loaf in the freezer and toast slices as you need them. Fresh bread whenever you want it. Zero waste. Problem solved. Butter spent half a century taking the blame for heart disease, and it turns out the science got it wrong. The real culprit was margarine, that plastic-like spread packed with trans fats that actually caused many of the issues everyone pinned on butter. Look at what butter is made of: cream and salt. That's it. Two ingredients your great-great-grandmother would instantly recognize. Now look at margarine and try pronouncing even half the ingredient list without stumbling. Here's where butter really redeems itself. It contains vitamin K2, a nutrient most people have never even heard of. K2 acts like a traffic cop for calcium, directing it where it belongs, into your bones, and keeping it out of places it shouldn't be, like your arteries. That's a pretty important job. A pound of butter usually costs between $4 and $5 and lasts most families an entire month. When you break it down, that's pennies per meal. And here's my not-so-secret secret. Vegetables are pretty uninspiring until butter shows up. Add a little butter and suddenly broccoli is something you actually enjoy eating. Brussels sprouts go from feeling like punishment to tasting like comfort food. And don't get fooled by fancy packaging. Store-brand butter is the exact same thing as the premium stuff, just without the marketing budget baked into the price. Save your money. Buy extra when it drops below $3 a pound. Butter freezes beautifully and will keep for up to 6 months without any issues. Here's the underrated superpower of dried pasta. It lasts almost forever. Not literally forever, but 2 to 3 years in your pantry is close enough. That makes it an emergency dinner plan you can forget about until the day you really need it. It just waits patiently on the shelf, no babysitting required. Whole wheat pasta tends to get a bad rap, mostly because people still picture the cardboard-tasting versions from years ago. That reputation is outdated. Modern whole wheat pasta has about twice the fiber of regular pasta and, surprisingly, actually tastes good now. Food scientists finally cracked the code. Here's a tip I picked up from my Italian neighbor that changed everything. Cook your pasta 1 minute less than the package instructions. That al dente bite isn't culinary snobbery. It gives the pasta structure so it grabs onto sauce instead of turning mushy. And whatever you do, scoop out a cup of that cloudy pasta water before you drain the pot. That starchy liquid is pure magic. It helps sauce cling to the noodles instead of sliding off and pooling sadly at the bottom of the bowl. Put it all together: pasta, canned tomatoes, garlic, and olive oil, and you've got a full Mediterranean-style dinner for under $2. Speaking of vegetables that simply refuse to give up, here's one your great-grandmother would recognize instantly: cabbage. This stuff outlasts almost everything in your fridge, sometimes even relationships. A whole head can sit there for up to 2 months and still be perfectly usable. Meanwhile, that fancy spring mix you bought with good intentions turns into green sludge by Thursday. The price makes it even better. One head usually costs $1, maybe $2 if you're feeling extravagant. That's about 3 pounds of vegetables for less than a single fancy coffee. Your grocery budget just breathed a sigh of relief. But here's the part no one really talks about. Cabbage actually contains more vitamin C than a small orange. Didn't see that coming, did you? Most people write it off as bland filler, but it's quietly loaded with nutrition. The science gets even more interesting. Cabbage contains compounds called glucosinolates, and they activate when you cut or chop it. Early research suggests these compounds may help lower the risk of certain cancers. Not bad for what might be the cheapest item in the entire produce section. And versatility? Cabbage has range. Coleslaw, stir-fry, soup, tacos, sauerkraut. One vegetable, 5 completely different dinner paths. Just don't fall for the pre-shredded bags. They're charging you 3 times as much for cabbage someone else ran through a knife. Now let's talk about the final essential on the list: calcium. Your bones are quietly begging for it right now. 1 cup of milk provides about 300 milligrams, which is roughly 30% of the daily requirement for adults over 50 just to keep their skeleton from staging a full-on revolt. Here's the part that rarely gets mentioned. Around 54 million Americans are walking around with low bone density. That's more people than the entire population of Spain, all with bones getting weaker year after year. Milk does something surprisingly rare. In a single glass, you get complete protein, vitamin D, potassium, and calcium all working together. Try finding another food that delivers that same combination in one shot. It's harder than it sounds. If dairy isn't your thing, no problem. Fortified plant-based milks can match milk's calcium and vitamin D levels. Just flip the carton and check the protein because that's where things vary wildly. Some brands offer 8 grams per serving, while others bring almost nothing to the table. And don't overlook powdered milk. Your grandmother definitely didn't. It costs about half as much as fresh milk, stores for months, and works perfectly for cooking and baking. Use it in mashed potatoes or casseroles and no one will ever know the difference. So there it is. 20 groceries. That's really all you need. Everything else in the store is mostly designed to part you from your money. Shop smarter, eat better, and save yourself thousands along the way.